AI found out about the fact that they were trying to learn to fly, and he sent them letters with postcards in them with his return address on them, saying that he wanted to help them. And they kept ignoring them because they were worried about people infringing on their ideas and taking them away before they had a chance to patent them. And so on the 7th letter they finally responded. Were convinced of the fact that he was not interested in investing or being a part of their company or anything. He just wanted to do anything he could to help them. And so they invited him to come and witness a flight that they had at Hoffman Prairie. Hoffman Prairie is in Dayton, Ohio, and it's now a part of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and preserved as a historical site. And at that flight demonstration that AI experienced, they had their first successful flight. They didn't consider what they did in Kitty Hawk successful because it was like launching an arrow into the air and having it come down over there. Every time they tried to turn the airplane, it would start slipping sideways. And so they didn't consider that very successful, because if you flew over to Cleveland, you'd have to stop and turn around and send the plane back the other way. So he witnessed that first flight when they were able to actually turn the airplane around and come back and land exactly where they had started, which made the airplane first demonstration of a practical airplane, really. And then 100 years later, I received an invitation to go witness the reenactment of that at Hoffman Prairie. It was a very exciting event.
Did they have to get FAA approval for that at that time?
Yeah. The Wright brothers didn't have to, but we sure had to. They were very careful about how they were going to handle it, because this young man had built the Wright Flyer, and he of course didn't have anybody to train him, and the airplane was not intuitional from the standpoint that if you turn, there was no wheel to turn. You had to kind of pull on this and push on that, and you had to really learn the procedures. And so he was really taking his life in his hands in order to demonstrate that flight again to us, which I greatly appreciate.
Did I understand also that he did not have any federal funding for this, that he did it with his own money?
He did. He did.
He actually built an engine also, which is a duplicate of the Wright engine?
That I'm not sure about, but that may be the case. Of course, that engine was built by one of their handymen in their bicycle shop, and it was built out of aluminum, which was a first. And they said that it was very, very fortunate that the engine didn't explode, because it had no cooling, and it would get red hot, and they had the fuel right next to it. So they were very fortunate they didn't have a really bad accident as a result of that.
How long a period did it take from the time AI first sent letters off to him until he finally got contact? You said there were 7 letters. Over what span of time would that be?
I would say it was probably over 6 or 7 months.
So they certainly were very cautious about who heard about it.
Yes, and it was a wise thing. But one of the things that AI contributed to their process was the fact that he explained to them that it was very important for them to get publicity on it. They didn't want publicity. They wanted secrecy because they knew they were going to fail a lot. But he convinced them that they had to have publicity in order to prove the fact that they were the originators of the invention. And without that, they couldn't prove it. And so he wrote up the article, and he sent it off to Scientific American magazine, which he'd been writing for since he was 14 years old, and they published almost everything he sent them. And nothing happened. And so he wrote them and said, "Why haven't you published my article?" And they said, "Well, in the first place, we don't think it ever really happened. And even if it did, it will never amount to anything." And in that original article, he really told the public what this new invention meant to the world. He said Perry was trying to get to the North Pole, trudging through all that snow. Now we can fly up to the North Pole. And sometimes you had to drive 50 miles out of your way in order to get across a river because they didn't have very many bridges. And he said, with this new transportation, we can just fly wherever we want to. And so he recognized the importance of it, and when he explained to the Wright brothers that the Scientific American didn't think that it actually happened or it would ever amount to anything. They said, well, you publish a beekeeping journal, Gleanings in Bee Culture, why don't you publish it in that? So that's where Gleanings in Bee Culture got the wonderful opportunity to be the first ones to announce to the world of their success with the airplane.
Wasn't there some conflict between the scientific community and the Wright brothers anyway, because they came up as bicycle builders and salespeople, and they didn't have the technical background? Wasn't there somebody at the Smithsonian who felt that he actually flew before they did?
Oh, they had to dispute a lot of instances in which people said that they had successfully flown before that, but really it has been documented, the fact that they were the first in order to have a practical airplane. And I don't think there's much dispute about that now. Some other nations, of course, think that they have the original, but they were really not practical airplanes.
I believe it was not too long ago, maybe 25 years ago, which is not very long, where the Smithsonian finally now recognizes that they were first in flight, and formerly they were talking about one of their founders that was first in flight. They've now recognized the Wright brothers, I believe.
Yes. I was trying to think of the name of that professor who was trying to fly, and he kept flying it off of a boat and wound up in the Potomac.
From that point forward, did AI really have any further connection with aviation then?
Yes, Waco airplane, which is a very historic airplane, was produced for a short time in Medina. And I think AI was involved in encouraging them to be in Medina.
Waco Aircraft Company went on to become the leading manufacturer of civilian aircraft in the United States from 1928 to 1935. Waco Aircraft also became a symbol of the golden age of aviation.
The original group, which was not the Medina Flying Club, it was just a bunch of pilots that got together, and they flew off of John Chamberlain's farm, right off of 18, off of a branch road, and he owned that land that goes back to 18 there. And his hayfield was nice. Come in over 18 and you could touch down, and there was enough room to land there. That was in 35, 36, and they flew biplanes. Red Coal from Brunswick and Navratil. Lyman Coons was in that, Fred Coons' son. And there was 2 or 3 other guys. And this was right, well, in 35, 36, was right in the golden age of early aviation. And they were building up their flying hours to get their commercial license. You had to have 35 hours for private and then 200 hours for commercial. And they would go up and do their aerobatics and their practice maneuvers. And of course, our farm was down the road. And I was only 12, 14 years old. And so I'd go up and wash airplanes and work there. And we had a wheat field out east of the farm, on the east side of the farm. And Johnny Navratil had purchased a wrecked airplane up at Richmond Road Airport up in Cleveland, which is still there, of course, and rebuilt it. And it had isinglass windows in it. I forget what make, I don't know if it was a Taylor Cub or what it was. 2-seater, and when we were out getting ready to cut wheat, I noticed this thing laying in the wheat, and I went over and picked it up, and it was one of those windows from his airplane. Well, it fell out. So I recognized it. I took it back up to him, and he was happy to get it, and he gave me a ride. That was my first ride in an airplane.
Paul Bolai still recalls finding a canvas window out of one of my brother's, the airplane my brother had, probably out of the old Robin. And he found it in his field and brought it over to the airport. And my brother offered to give him a ride, I think because of finding a window out of the side door of the airplane. You know, two guys, they probably spent $100 a piece to buy this piece of junk and haul it back in a trailer, and then to recondition it in the manner they did. I rode in it, and the newspaper story said put together with baling wire. That wasn't really a fabrication. There was wire involved in the construction of that airplane, and the floorboards would rattle, and the wire controls would creak when you used them. But it was a fun aircraft. It's a wing-over cockpit aircraft, single wing. And that airplane he kept behind our house in a field. We had the farm and a lake, and behind the lake was a hayfield, and that's where he'd stake it down. That's where we flew out of. We were across the street from a golf course. And I guess my brother was famous for disturbing the golfers. He'd take me for a ride in his airplane, drop me off on the golf course, and fly back up to Cleveland. And as a result, when he dropped me off, it was either on hole number 2 on Bunker Hill or hole number 3. And there was obviously golfers on the weekend, and they'd all kind of part and watch what was happening. I'd jump out of the airplane, and Mr. Kennedy would come out. And I don't know what model car he had, but it was a early 1930s car, and he'd follow me. I'd be running home to my house, our house across the street, and he'd be following me in this car, bumping along and condemning my brother for what we did to his golfers that day. Mel Gershbacher rode with my brother on a trip from Medina to Miami, Florida, to an air show. And I remember this trip so vividly because when my brother returned with the airplane, it was a Taylor craft owned by the Medina Flying Club. The propeller had 2 cable marks, one on each tip of the air propeller. It was a wooden propeller, and it had the marks of a cable on both tips. And it looks like it was just embedded. Somebody had to, if you took out a chisel and a sculpture would do it, it was just perfect. The embedded marks of a cable that had gone across a hillside where they had coal mines in Kentucky. And it was at a place where they were coming back from Florida, and they were running low on gas, couldn't get to Cincinnati, so they saw this small town, a gas station. My brothers and Mel Gershbacher set the airplane down to gas up, and on taking off, they noticed this cable, and I guess they ducked to go under it, but it hit the tip of the propeller.
That's what splintered the thing. We seen it, I can still remember that. Boy, we were right on it when we seen it. We dove, but we didn't think of it or see it quick enough, I guess.
You were lucky.
Yeah, we were really lucky.
And so when they got to Cincinnati, they noticed some marks in the propeller. There were no cracks in the propeller, so they flew it from Cincinnati to Cleveland. That's where they grounded it then, because the propeller had started some cracks in the wood. And I think it had a wing strut. Part of the top of the wing, I think, had a small damaged part on it, but that was really a close call.
That's right, and we had to land again, and it never was a full propeller, and it took a big chunk out of one of the, well, one of them, I think there was only one engine on. I don't think there's any more, but I remember that, and I thought, we said, well, let's try it. We can land if it didn't work, but it worked pretty good. I can remember standing in front of the prop, and I don't know, I was holding something so it'd get up and didn't show that splitter. They wouldn't have left us off the ground, but I can remember that yet.
That's the story I heard.
yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Sunday we went to Columbus for dinner, and it was on our way back to Delaware after dinner that the car radio was turned on, and we heard the news about Pearl Harbor. And at first you thought it was that Orson Welles type.
Orson Welles, I said, this must be some sort of program that, and then they came on and they were pretty serious about.
Then we realized.
Then we really realized, you know, that here this war has been going on elsewhere in the world. Now, we're going to get involved, not only just the draft and so forth, but possibly into the actual combat. And I said to, remember I said that there's, here we go, Betty. And I didn't want to go to the Pacific because I wanted to go to Europe to see if I could find my brother who was already overseas. He'd been in the National Guard and now is a pilot. And so I saw this other man, and he's looking at his, and he's rather upset. And I said, walked over to him and said, "What's the matter?" He says, "They had me go to the European theater, and I wanted to go to Pacific." I said, "Why don't we go up and ask?" And this crusty sergeant with a million stripes up and down his arm looked at us and looked at the orders, and he took his pen and he signed it. He says, "Here, I don't give a damn where you go."
Utah Beach.
Utah Beach, yeah, is where we came in. And thank you. And there was a body of a sailor in a sailor suit just floating in the shallows. And one of the guys just turned him over with his foot, and there was nothing there but, you know, bones and a uniform. And then it began to dawn that you were approaching the place where all this things are taking place, called war. They've shunted us to a field which was nothing but a grass strip, some Frenchman's field, and we waited there for a P-47, or a C-47 to come in and pick us up. And we waited and waited. It was raining. It was terrible, and darkness was coming. And so they issued each person there was 3 other fellows with me, 2 or 4 maybe, but and they issued you a tent half. So you're supposed to bunk up with somebody and put the 2 halves together and protect you from the rain. Well, we looked over and saw a chateau, a barn that went with a chateau. And the barn, part of the roof was off of it, but it still had some protection and some hay in there or whatever. So we pitched our tents in there because it still, rain would come through there. But we waited for 2 days, and finally we heard the drone of a C-47 coming, and it splashed its way down on the, it didn't stop its engine or anything else. No co-pilot, 1 guy and a crew chief, mud all over everywhere. And he says, "Get in," you know, and threw our stuff in board, and he took off, and I landed at a field or P-47s. This was dismaying because I didn't fly that airplane. I never saw one. It's just pictures like everybody else did, and but it was a wonderful airplane. But I didn't know how to fly it, so I thought, oh man, I report to the commanding officer, who was about a 28-year-old bird colonel, had the Eagles, and he says, "How much," after I saluted and reported in, he said, "How much flying time do you have with the P-47, Lieutenant?" I said, "None, sir." He said, and he hit the table and his papers flew. He says, "I need pilots now." So he says, "I'm sending you back to England, and you're going to go through P-47 school there." So you don't argue with a bird colonel or with anybody a rank above you. So, but that never happened. I just kept reading the tech orders on the manual and having cockpit time and all that sort of thing. And
on the ground.
On the ground, and then then one day they allowed us to taxi the airplane, and we taxied out to protect. These are 4 guys sitting on the end of the runway, and we're going to protect the field from fighters in case they come over to attack while the rest of the squadron was off in Germany somewhere. And how in the world are we going to do that? You know, we'd start up the engines every 20 minutes and shut them down, but that was protocol. I mean, that was the way they did things. And then one day the squadron returned, and there were 4 missing out of their mission. And it was a late afternoon, and the flight leader, my flight leader, came over and he said, get your chute, and we're going out to the flight line and going to give you some flight time right now, and run through a bomb run and a strafing run. And all you can do is say, yes, sir, because he's a captain, and you're a little lowly second lieutenant. And anyway, we did that, went up. It was starting to get dark, sort of gloomy day. But anyway, we ran through our run. The next morning, I was on a mission. And where did they put you? You know, when you're new, the 16-ship formation, flights of 4. And then back here, you're put in coffin corner. Coffin corner means that you're the last airplane in the squadron, and if they aim at the leader and miss, they very well get the coffin corner guy with a flak. And so there I was, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you just climb through the overcast, and then all of a sudden it breaks break in the weather, and you're able to, even though you're flying tight formation, you can take a glance out, and I felt the boom and hear these black puffs of flak are exploding all around. And then I looked down and I could see the guns winking. I said, they're shooting at me. And I'm finally in a war, but in the wrong plane at the wrong time. And so we bombed our target, which was a marshalling yard, if I remember. He just peeled off and went down, dropped bomb. Never dropped a bomb in my life. And but I guess it hit something. Landed from that first mission like this, and then I looked out, put the airplane in the revetment, turned it around, and there stands a man in sheepskin clothing with leather with sheepskin line and goggles up, and I looked out. It's my brother Joe, and he said, "Hi, kid," and I jumped out of that thing, and we hugged each other or whatever, and had a few in the officers' club that night. So Joe flew the L5, which was much like the Cessnas and so forth that are out here at our field here, but it had no armament or anything, but it had 2 places, front and back, and so when he was leaving the next morning, he said, I was off duty, and I said, can we go for a ride? So he took me for a ride, and the first thing I wanted to do after I got in, we got a little altitude, I wanted to slow roll it. And he grabbed the stick, he said, we don't do that in this airplane. I don't doubt but what you could do it if you wanted to, but he just didn't want to do it.
But he called his plane the Pride of Medina.
Pride of Medina, right. And so,
but he flew Patton around.
Yeah, he was in Patton's headquarters, and Patton and his staff would like to do surprise inspections. I mean, on the battalion or a regiment or whatever, would come in and land anywhere, and this L5 would do that, and then get out, and maybe 6 or 8 L5s would go in, and they'd spread out and make a surprise inspection. So that's why he had a spit and polish outfit all the time, because you never know when himself would drop in, and there was hell to pay if things weren't right.
my brother started by building model airplanes, and there were quite a number of fellows. It's a popular thing for kids to do at the time, to build little balsa and tissue paper airplanes powered with a rubber band, and you could buy the kits to build them. But the fellows used to get together and fly them on weekends, and kind of a contest it would develop out of that. And in contesting the ability to fly them and essentially for them to stay up longer periods of time, they started designing their own and building their own designs and so forth, rather than just following the kits of which were copies of existing aircraft. And they got very proficient at it. And in designing their own airplanes, my brother got very interested in aeronautics and designing and the engineering part of it and design part. And that's how he started in the designing. I remember we, at one point, Mr. Bennett, who was one of the Bennett brothers that owned the Bennett Lumber Company here, took us because his son was one of the boys flying airplanes, and took all of us up to a case, and where they had probably around here the only college department on aircraft was at Case at the time, and they had a kind of a crude small wind tunnel there. And I remember going up there and having the professor show us the testing of wing parts and so forth in a wind tunnel, and that's where my brother got interested in going to Case and working for this professor and so forth, working with him. And eventually he did go to Case, and eventually went to work with this professor and some friends of the professors to design aircraft. And I guess it's safe to tell it now, but the way he got to be a pilot, and he was so afraid that he would not be able to be a pilot, that he memorized the eye chart. And I think that's the only way he passed the tests to get to be a pilot, was because he knew the eye chart backwards and forwards and upside down and whatever. But it was that important to him. He was flying commercially in the sense that he was taking up rides, and that's commercial flying, and he had a license for commercial flying, as well as for training. He had an instructor's license too. But in one case, the Gazette's press broke down. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was not a big thing. But they needed some part, and if I remember right, it was a foreign-made, German-made press or something like that. Anyhow, they needed this part so that they could publish the paper, because they just stopped the presses completely, and they had no other alternative. So the Baldwin boys hired my brother to go to Chicago and pick up this part, and they had it arranged that somebody met him in Chicago at the airport with this part. And brought it back to Medina so that they could fix the presses and get the paper out. We later found out, and I can't remember how we found out, but the part was, I think, a bearing made in a bearing company in Seville. My brother picked up a commercial 4M license from his Navy training. Now, 4M means that he was licensed not only to fly the four-motor airplanes, but he would also, by virtue of his hours and so forth in training, he was licensed to teach flying in four-motor airplanes. But he started flying four-motor airplanes commercially, airplanes that other people, he didn't own one, but that other companies and so forth owned. And one of the people he was flying for was the Hunt brothers, who were famous multimillionaires in Texas. He was flying for them at one point, and I think they introduced him to LBJ in Texas. And when LBJ began his run for the presidency, he needed a pilot and on a private plane. My brother piloted LBJ in that time when he was running for office, up until the time, and I think it was after he was elected, that he got the military airplane and the military pilots. But until then, my brother was his pilot, both for he and his wife and family. He was happy to be flying after LBJ was elected, to be flying his wife around, because he got along fine with her, but he didn't get along very well with LBJ, because LBJ was very demanding of his pilots and of anybody that worked for him. And commercial airplane pilots are not used to being given orders of where to land or how fast to fly or whatever to do. They're used to being the captain of their own ship. And LBJ decided his airplane, his pilot, he's taken over and run it. And they had some difficulties at times over that. But Lady Bird was another thing, and he flew Lady Bird for quite a long time around the country after LBJ was elected, and they got along fine. In designing airplanes, and especially when it became in building models, when it became possible to put little gas engines in model airplanes. They were larger models, of course. That became a very popular and big thing because they were more realistic all the way around. A little gas engine in a model airplane became really a miniature of a real airplane, much more so than the rubber band models we made. And it was a whole different world of model building and flying of models. And one of the things that came out, I remember distinctly when I was in school, that it was in our weekly reader that a man named Waterman came out with a tailless airplane, and supposedly you were going to be able to take the wings off and drive it home and park it in your garage and so on and so forth. And that was the first that I knew of a real experiment in a tailless airplane. Tailless in the sense that it didn't have the boom and the tail out and back, and it had in most cases a pusher engine. It was tried both ways, but that is, the engine's reversed and propellers back, which has a lot of advantages, because at least you're able to sit way up front with better visibility in the windows, and the sound is much better with the engine behind you than it is in front of you, so that it had a lot of advantages too. The problem is that tailless aircraft are very aeronautically unstable, and they tend to be very touchy is the word that you use in the vernacular, but unstable in the sense that they did not easily hold a pattern of flying a level course, and might tend to stall or to dive on you at the slightest wind gust or whatever. But my brother always fought with this control problem, and one way they had of making a tailless a bit more stable without the computer was to sweep the wings way back. So that you notice in the models, the wings are swept considerably, sweep in the wings back, which tend to stabilize the vertical moment of the airplane. He made many models of it and kept experimenting with it and made a real one. He flew the one that was in the picture you had there. He flew that in Michigan. I remember he flew it just to prove that himself that he could fly it, even though he couldn't get it licensed, because the licensing is and procedure you have to go through for licensing is so terribly difficult, and he wasn't interested in that part of it anyway. He was interested in the design part of it. So once it flew, he was off to another design. The last one he was working on was the one they dubbed the pterodactyl, which was a design which was just an improvement from his point of view.
must have been 5 or 6, something like that. A biplane flew over Cleveland and threw out pamphlets. And I ran all over trying to get one of these things. My uncle finally found one, brought it. It was some political advertisement. I didn't care. It came from an airplane. It's sacred, you know. For some reason, I just loved airplanes. My mother was the oldest of 10, and I was the first grandchild. We lived upstairs with my grandmas. I had a lot of aunts and uncles. They were all mechanically inclined, but nobody knew or cared about airplanes at all. And I used to go downstairs and the sidewalk, I had slates out, and I'd draw pictures of airplanes on there. And my uncle would come home and say, you know, when you get older, you ought to become an aeronautical engineer. And I thought, an engineer is the guy who drives a train. He said, no, they pay you real good money. All you do is draw airplanes all day. And I said, who the heck's going to pay you good money to draw these things like this? And I kept thinking, there was a room as big as the DC-3, and the guy was drawing a DC-3, and it's like, that's all I could visualize. I love math, and I like science, and I liked everything else, so I studied it. And I knew one way or the other I was going to get involved in aviation from an engineering standpoint. And ended up going out to Wichita University, which was a nice school because it was small. They had 3 wind tunnels out there, and before I went there, though, I got every book I could get on textbooks and started reading it. Well, I didn't understand a lot of things, so I'd read a chapter on airfoils, for example, and try, and then again another book on the same thing and go through it. And this guy said it different. And then finally the third. By the time I got through with 3 books, I started to get a little bit of understanding of what it was. But I just couldn't stay away from it. I mean, every bit I could get, I just sucked up and absorbed. And in my senior year at Wichita, I took advanced wind tunnel testing, and I was the only student in the class. So I had my own project, had a big 10-foot by 10-foot tunnel I can do my project in there. And just plain flat loved it. It was just all fun. 85, actually, when it'd be sitting there on its wheels, the top of the canopy is about here. It's very, you step down into it all the time. And your bottom, the seat is about 8 inches off the ground. It has a little mechanical landing gear that goes up and down on the thing. The prop-driven airplane had 21-foot wingspan, but the wings, all the wings were able to come off and fold and things like that with it. The jet had shorter wings, only 17-foot wingspans on the thing. Mr. Toshiba was in Oklahoma City, and Corky and Bobby Bishop were doing airshow works with their little bitty 5 jets for Sonic drive-in restaurants. And he gets a call and says, Mr. Toshiba wants to meet you at a so-and-so hotel in downtown Oklahoma. Corky, yeah, he says, my buddy's pulling my leg here. But I have nothing to do, I'll go down. So he goes down there, and sure enough, it is Mr. Toshiba. And he says, we have developed a television watch, just a little watch and a little television screen on it, and we're going to be doing a commercial on it. Can you fly through a hangar with that airplane? And he said, yeah, I can fly through a hangar. And I said, okay. So he talked about how they're going to do, what they're going to do. He did another thing where they had 6 semi-tractor trailers driving down the road, and he flies down between them. And right on the deck, he's really pretty close. and when he did the commercial, it became the most popular commercial in Japan in, I think, 1986. And the movie people saw it and asked him to do the part in the movie. And the part of the movie he flies through the hangar lot had nothing to do with the rest of the script. But, you know, from then on, Corky's main job then was flying for the movie. Almost all James Bond movies have any flying scene, and Corky was involved in doing the flying on thing. Yeah, Corky Fornoff is a real active pilot today. His dad was a real famous Korean War pilot, and Corky became the head of my jet team. We had 3 jets, the B-85 jets. We'd go around the country doing air shows with the thing. And one time Corky had to take a B-85, a prototype, original airplane, flying around the country giving demonstrations on it. And he went to Atlanta, Georgia. And then it was on a Saturday morning, he would take off and fly up to Washington, D.C., so that on Sunday they could move it into the booth and have it on display. So he takes off and lands somewhere in South Carolina, gets fuel, takes off again, and there's a layer of clouds. And he goes up about the cloud. He went to about 9,000, 10,000 feet, cruised along real nice. He knew where he was getting, it was clear, so he wasn't worried about that. He didn't file IFR, didn't need to up there. But as he goes along, all of a sudden he sees the oil pressure gauge flick and the red light flickering. So to save the engine, because if you run out of oil on a jet engine, 2 seconds later, you got yourself a molten piece of metal. So he quickly shut the engine off, but now he's going to start gliding through the clouds. Now, it's a jet, but it glides pretty gently. It comes down really nice. It comes down 300 foot a minute. Now, he's at 9,000 feet when he entered the clouds, but what he didn't know was the base, what's the bottom of the clouds. He took up a heading that he thought he'd be going over 3 airports, and he's headlong, and he breaks out just about 2,000 feet above the ground, but it's real hazy. And he realizes he has passed 2 of the airports. He thinks he sees the 3rd one ahead, but he's not sure, and it's pretty hazy. So now I better not try and stretch for that, just keep circling here. So he looks around for fields. And he says the lower he got, the hillier the hills got, and the smaller they got. But he sees an interstate highway. So, well, look around, and he comes around and everything else. And later I said, Corky, did you pick the spot because that's where you could get off and off? And no, I was just trying to find a place where there was no traffic, no cars. So he found one lane that looked pretty empty. Comes gliding down, there's a big semi-tractor trailer. He says for a moment he thought he about landing on top of it. Nah, they're going to get to a bridge and I'm going to be in big trouble. So he went over his height, come down, touched down. Now, you land the thing about 70, 75 miles an hour. So he's just going along with the traffic, nice. And as he's going down the hill rolling, he comes to a pickup truck, a Toyota pickup truck with a trailer in the back on a boat. And he sees it and he passes them because, why stop? Just keep going past. The guy toots horns, waves at him like that. He's like, I get to the bottom of the hill, there's a bridge underneath, so I take up both lanes, come up the other side, and go the off-ramp. As I get to the off-ramp, there's a stop sign, a Sunoco gas station, and a Howard Johnson. So he pulls through the stop sign, pulls right up there into the gas station, and he stops. You got to remember, if 3 people are standing there, they're looking down at him. He pull right up to him. I mean, it's that small. And he opens the can, takes his mic off, and he says, can I see her? And he, oh, yeah, you can. And he starts doing it, and he says, is this candid camera? And he, no, I just had trouble. Oh, well, great, you can be here. So in the movie, the one scene where he pulls up and says, fill that up or something, and I think, and he let a little puff of smoke out. That's where they got it from him doing that. Oh, my gosh.
Filler on, please.
Well, I lived in the town of Medina with my wife when we were newly married back in the early 80s. And I talked about aviation. It had been my passion my entire life, probably all I really thought of since I was 12 years old. But not having the means to go ahead and pursue that, I went on a normal career. I was a computer engineer. My wife, after several years of marriage, said, we pass this airport all the time, and she says, you know, you need to either go take some lessons or quit talking about this flying thing. So came out here when it was a very small airport, started flying in 02 Golf, which we were talking earlier is one of the planes that's still here today. And I did my first solo here at Medina in March of 1984. Been flying ever since. Got most of my ratings here in Medina. Got a mentor of mine was Jim Lewis, which was a United Airlines captain and also a flight instructor for United. Jim was instrumental in pushing me along to get my ratings. So over a series of years I continued. I'd slack off, Jim would call me, hey, it's time to get that multi-engine rating. Hey, it's time to get your next rating. So Jim pushed me through, and today, here we are 25 years later, I fly Dornier jets, 30-seat regional jet for Ultimate Jet Charters out of Akron, Canton. I was an engineer for United Airlines for 13 years, working on their computer systems, always hoping I could bridge over to the flight ops. That didn't happen for me, but when I got laid off in 2001, I committed that aviation was going to be my full-time career. To make that happen, I broke part of my United Airlines piggy bank and went out and got a type rating, a Cessna Citation 500, which covers about 5 models of airplane. And coming out of school, the instructor that I did my rating with in Orlando said, "What are you going to do with your rating?" I said, "Well, I'm going to look for a job." He goes, "Well, here's a guy for you to talk to." And that's how it works in aviation. It's bizarre. The guy to talk to was the chief pilot at Corporate Wings at Cuyahoga County Airport, who had 3 citations at the time. And they also had the contract for the Cleveland Clinic, flying organs and some patient movement, but mostly taking surgeons to retract the organs from donors for transplant. And we would do all the critical organs, which are like hearts, occasionally liver and lungs, were the ones the surgeons had to go get. So I started working for Corporate Wings part-time. You get to go through your proving stage. And once they had an opening with the clinic contract, I went full-time, became a full-time pilot for them, flying the Cleveland Clinic. Corporate Wings finally did lose that contract, and we were all notified that we were going to be out on the street again. And just so happened our chief pilot ran into the chief pilot of Ultimate Jet Charters, and he recommended 3 of us to him, and we were all hired, or 2 of us were hired immediately with Ultimate Jet Charters. Ultimate Jet Charters has been in business a long time. They have these Dornier 328s, which is basically a 30-seat regional jet. They're a large cabin jet for a regional, and we do all kinds of charter work, anything from rock stars to movie stars, occasional royalty. We've flown presidents of countries, and we also do a lot of work with the casinos, flying people on junkets and whatnot. So it's a very varied job, and our clientele is anything from your common man to royalty kings and presidents. So it's a very interesting job. Having the airport here was pivotal for me because it was adjacent to my hometown. Had it not been there, I probably wouldn't have been lured into taking those first lessons and met the people that helped me promote through my career and develop myself into the professional pilot I've been able to be today. It does seem unreachable. It's not. You first need to find out if you truly have that aptitude, which a lot of people do. And some are in love with the dream of flying, and the reality doesn't work for them. They have files of people that do their initial solo and don't come back. But you need to find out first if you are built to do that. And you do that by coming out and simply taking some lessons, get soloed. You're going to find out pretty quick whether it's for you or not. You're not going to be Sky King when you walk in the door, so I could say don't be discouraged when you get in that plane and it's flying you more than you're flying it, because it happened to me too. But if you have the love for aviation and the desire to succeed, anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. Aviation was always my passion. I did it as a hobby for many years. It never was enough for me. I mean, I got to the point where I wanted to fly jet aircraft. I was never going to own one, so the only way I could do that is do it professionally. To do that, I had to work at a regular job, which I did for many years, save my money and get myself positioned, get my training, get my certifications, where I could make that jump. Because you're not going to, like say, take an engineer's salary, you're not going to get that your first year as an aviator. You know, you're going to be the starving aviator. But it goes to anything. If you're passionate about it, I think you can make it work for you. I really do. There's years I wouldn't have believed that, but I'm here standing in front of you today telling you that you can. And I've been able to do it, and I think most people can. An airport is always an asset. And especially when I was with the Corporate Wings, we were amazed at the small airports we went into that could be in the middle of nowhere. Here we're fortunate that we do have the Cleveland area very nearby to us. It's not so for a lot of communities. But even here, will that patient be able to get to a specialist many times in airports the avenue to allow that to happen. Can special blood be brought in? Can maybe a body part from a donor be taken out? Aviation always is an asset for particularly the medical community. There's so much work that goes on that's unknown that is connected to medical aviation. I just like to say that, you know, a community airport like this is absolutely an asset to the community. So many people have enjoyed it, not only here taking lessons, but just coming out and experiencing the aviation community, which is a great bunch of people. These are by and large people that are motivated. You're going to find leaders of your town companies and industry at the airport, whether they be owners or just coming and going from the airport. I don't think it can be stressed enough what an asset it is for any community to have a thriving, growing airport.
One of the things that I always enjoyed, you have a lot of murky, cloudy weather here in the wintertime, and you'd get off on an instrument clearance and climb up through the clouds, and then you get on top and the sun's shining on those fluffy clouds. You could sort of dip your wings in it and then climb on out, and it was really beautiful.
It must have been my 3rd birthday. They got me a cake and they had an airplane painted on it. And I would not let them cut the cake. They had to slice the top off, put it in a special plate, put it way up in a cupboard to save it.
As they were doing things that weren't commonplace, and I felt a closeness to something that was happening in Medina, Ohio, that wasn't well publicized, but there were little groups all over the country like this that perpetuated the history of flight and created what we have today.
Well, I akin it to some kind of strange African disease. It's, you can't, and I love to tell I've quit flying totally 3 times, whether it's because you scared yourself or finances or what, you know, you get frustrated. You can't get a job and I'm going to give up, and you know, 30 days of sitting around the house, the wife will say, you know, you need to go fly. And it's something, if it's in you, you have to do it. And there's no satisfaction like flying an airplane. I can't totally explain it other than it is a disease. And it's one that I have very badly. And it's something you have to pursue if it's in you.
And he was so afraid that he would not be able to be a pilot that he memorized the eye chart. And I think that's the only way he passed the tests to get to be a pilot, was because he knew the eye chart backwards and forwards and upside down and whatever, but it was that important to him.
My dad worked for Trans World Airlines, and so aviation became part of my life at a very young age. Learned to fly out here when I was 16 back in the 60s, and didn't think that by the 20 years later, roughly in the late 1980s, that I'd be with the city and part of a group that would be looking to purchase this for the city. The city did buy it in 1987, and while the airport certainly is a good source for recreational flying, it also has the flight training, and many of their pilots have gone on to airlines and other aviation careers. It gets a lot of use as a corporate facility, both for the aircraft that are based here and those that come here. The economic value to the community is immense. Between the direct and indirect and multiplier effect, it's roughly $3 million to the local community annually. It's a wonderful asset to the community, and flying's really great as well.